I was born in Germany, and growing up there in a Jewish family, and then after having a fairly pleasant childhood, suddenly finding that we were forced to leave the country, and even further learning that many of my colleagues were killed, slaughtered, and put into prison for reasons that no one could ever explain to me, and it took me years to even begin to try to understand. So in any case, it left me with this question, this interest in social misunderstanding of individuals, of families, of children. And that was very much the case with autism. And when I first really became interested in it was in graduate school, when I met this a German professor by the name of Bettelheim, who sort of demonized parents.
Dr. Bruno Bettelheim had said that the parents provided homes that were like Nazi concentration camps. Eric Schopler took tremendous opposition to that and let us know there were other reasons, and gave us hope that there would be a turnaround in that.
He had a statue of a woman, sort of a modern sculpture, curvy, and he had the children crawl all over this stone mother to become adapted to this, presumably the idea that they had a mother who was hard as stone. So it didn't have to, you didn't have to be a particular intellectual genius to question that kind of a proposition. And this was such an exaggerated point of view. When it was combined with his other authoritarian ways, he became a negative role model to me. And that became very, very useful when I came to move to Chapel Hill.
Eric's concern was to quantify and measure whenever one could, but always to keep a keen eye on doing it in a way that picked up the essentials as to what mattered for individuals.
We found Eric to be very warm and understanding and caring, and I was blown out of the water because I had just spent 2.5 years being made to fit a mold, but I wasn't quite sure what the mold was. But I thought it was, later I found out that it was the refrigerator model. And when he did the about face and was the warm, compassionate, caring human being, I thought, God, we have really hit on something big here.
It was the common knowledge, not backed by research at all, that parents, especially mothers, were the culprits in autism. And here was this young professional mingling with us as one of us, which was pretty brave of him, because in those days you could be chastised and ostracized if you mingled with parents.
Well, first, from Bettelheim, I already knew that this theoretical point of view was not the way to understand autism, that you've got to understand it in practical terms. His theoretical view, this Freudian view, is fine as a literary metaphor, but as social science, as a way of actually understanding or working with people, it's a failure.
I think that today we don't realize how remarkable what Eric has done was at the time, because in part there's so many of his disciples all around the world, and we're doing things that he taught us, such as working with one-way mirrors and working where parents can see what we're doing, and then we bring parents in. And at the time that was such a radical difference from the more traditional therapy where you go get a child, walk them down a long hall, work with them, and then return them to the parent as if you'd somehow changed their lives.
Here was a professional, no parent, not a parent, a professional who is willing to go out on a limb for us. In fact, early on, he wrote an article called Parents as Scapegoats. That was sort of unheard of for a psychologist to be saying that in his field at that time, when so much of the field, the majority of people in the field, were Freudians and psychoanalysts. And he was saying that parents, the kind of parents we were scapegoats. We loved it.
At the same time, I met Bob Reichler, who also gone to the University of Chicago, and so we had a lot of similar background, and he was very intrigued by the research I'd done with my dissertation on perceptual problems in autism. So he wanted to know if we couldn't base a program on that, a project. And eventually, so we came on this idea that we would work with parents as co-therapists, as collaborators, and in that process would apply the best educational approaches to their children, get their help to do it, and then get the schools involved, and gradually to get the community involved, and to start that on a pilot basis.
The idea of perpetuating the Child Research Project, which later became Division Teach, was started because the parents wanted something more for their children. And we were all sort of, it was kind of like a group admiration thing. We were all getting results. Everybody was feeling good about what was happening for their children, and we were all thinking, why can't we do this for all these other children out here?
One of the parents, was a parent's idea, is that why don't we get the state to pick this up? And that's what we ended up doing. So we had a meeting in Raleigh, and we presented our approach, and the parents were there with their children. We invited the legislature, and they gave it the momentum to start the first 3 centers and the first 10 classrooms in the public schools.
He developed an infrastructure that supported the concepts that he felt were most important, and those included things like having teach centers that were within an hour's drive of anywhere in North Carolina, and the idea that you had to make these services available to people in ways that they could use them.
The acronym for TEACH, the TEACCH, was an awkward one, and it was not my first preference, but I couldn't think of a better one, and so it stuck. But it was very nice, because I remember when one of the president of the Autism Society of America, Mary Ackley, I don't know if you ever met her or not, she once gave a talk, and she was a very effective speaker, but she said, she opened this with a large group of people. She said, you all probably wonder why we trust our children to an organization that can't spell.
The TEACH program, which he established, had a huge impact all over the world. There are programs built on TEACH in many, many different countries now. And so he was somebody who not only developed a good set of methods of treatment, but he was also a powerful advocate, getting other people to take up these methods.
I think Eric's most important contribution to me was that he empowered me. He gave me voice. He gave me the ability to get up in front of people that I thought needed to hear it and tell them what kind of wood shingles was made out of.
My experience at TEACH and knowing Eric has changed almost everything that I do clinically and with research. I feel that the ways that I approach families and children, the ways that I think about what we want to accomplish, and the ways that I think about the links between research and clinical work are radically different because of my experience with knowing Eric.
The thing that really impressed me about him was the fact that he really sincerely believed in the parents being the co-therapist with whatever he did by way of his research. And this was really important to him, and he never left that. It was always, you are telling me things that I need to know to do what I need to do. And this, to me, was just very different from any profession that I had ever known.
What's the effect of the parents' involvement on the way services is done? And I think one of the main functions is that when you go only by research, then there's a gap between what happens in the research laboratory and what happens in the real world. Having parents involved and treating parents as part of the scientific material that you have to work with along with the children, that gap becomes a little bit closer, that gap becomes bridged.
My own personal life, I've spent from the outside looking in, I think, as an artist and for various other reasons. And then when Bucky was diagnosed with autism, I believe that pushed us further outside. We came to North Carolina, and Eric Schopler told us as a family that we would not be outside and we would not be left alone. We would be included and supported, and that things would be all right. And it has proven to be that. I knew Eric had to be a good guy because he's married to an artist.
You're biased with that. What I believe Eric Schopler brought was being able to teach parents how to teach their children. So not only were we co-therapists and collaborating with the Teach model, but we also became teachers of our children.
The children in the autism spectrum are particularly both engaging and endearing because they are honest, straightforward, they don't know how to lie, and they present problems that are deep and genuine: communication, social interactions, things that they by and large have not produced or caused themselves, and that situation evokes a feeling in many of us that's strong and that makes us stay with it.
Sometimes I feel like Eric is sort of hovering over our center in Michigan, keeping us all on track. That's true for centers all over the world. We're all grateful for how much Eric has taught us.
All of us in research would like to think that we would be known for our scientific discoveries of one kind or another. Of course, that may happen, but actually what we're usually known for is the young people that we have brought on who carried on the traditions that we sought to establish. And I think that will be the main thing that will live on for 50 years with Eric.
One of the most memorable things that Eric has said to me was, we can treat our kids in 3 ways. We can do it right, we can do it halfway, like institutions, or we can do what Hitler did. We all know which route Eric took. They say, oh, soldiers never die, they just fade away. Eric, don't fade away, we still need you.
My wife's background is English, mine is Jewish, and the difference between the Englishman and the Jew in saying goodbye is that the Englishman leaves without saying goodbye, and the Jew says goodbye without leaving.
Having made the kind of impact that he has in this state, in this country, and in the world, he will always be remembered for just helping parents coming out of the doldrums of despair, I guess.
I think Eric's greatest legacy will be that parents whose children have been through this program, who have seen their children blossom and develop, will remember him forever for that.
I want to continue the work with autism on the assessment instruments that we're going to revise, and continue to visit some countries and to keep on going. I had a job offer from Japan to be a visiting professor at Kawasaki University, plan to do that. And to be a grandfather to my many grandchildren. I think that's it.